Journey Between Lives, an interview with Michael Newton. I'm a traditional psychotherapist. Initially, I didn't work with past life regression. Unlike what I do now, I worked with behavioral modification, and my patients were people suffering from insomnia, depression, and other disorders. One day a man came to me and asked, "If you use hypnosis, could you send me back to my past life?" At the time I was very arrogant and said that such things, yin-yang and so on, weren't part of my traditional academic orientation and that he should see someone else. But then something happened. A few years after this visit, a client came to me complaining of pain in his side. He said he'd already seen many doctors, had x-rays, and was told it was psychosomatic, meaning it was caused by his thoughts, and that if you simply forgot about it, the pain would go away. But the pain was so intense that he couldn't sleep, and he asked me if I could find its root cause in his childhood, if I could conduct a regression into his childhood. I conducted such sessions, exploring many aspects of his childhood, but found no instance of falling on a sharp object or being stabbed, nothing that could have caused such acute pain. Dissatisfied with these results, I told this man, who, by the way, very quickly entered a hypnotic state, and this is an important point because it is the key to the past life work I am currently doing, go to the source of your pain. Tell me about the first moment you felt it. And suddenly he found himself on a battlefield in France during the First World War, fighting in a British division. So the man suddenly regressed into one of his past lives, still lying on my couch. And I, being very skeptical by nature, asked him to write on his hand the insignia of his division, what battle he was talking about, where he was, who he was fighting, because I didn't believe what was happening. During the session he described all the details quite accurately, and I was fascinated by history, so I knew that what he was saying was true. Then I realized that this was my first case of past life regression. I felt confused, like a little boy lost in the house when his mother is not around. After this incident, I realized that past life regression was a reality. I was, of course, skeptical and conducted numerous experiments, after which more time passed, and then another incident occurred. Almost by chance, a woman came to me complaining of loneliness and social isolation. She felt as if she didn't belong in this world, disoriented both in her life and among the people around her, and even contemplated suicide. I began working with this woman as well, but without touching on past lives, we worked with her childhood under hypnosis, recalling her early years, and nothing of the sort emerged. But as with the man, I asked her, "Go to the source of your loneliness and lack of companionship." And again she went into a very deep and very fast hypnotic state. The sum of Buddhism was very hypnotizable. And then she said, "Right now I see all my companions right in front of me." I didn't understand, thinking, who are we talking about? What support group? Who are all these people? She looked at the wall of my office and said, "These are my soulmates. There were 8 of them." And she wrote down who was who. I couldn't believe it. Goosebumps ran down my spine, because then I was talking to someone who was talking about life between lives, and this was an area that I had never studied. I hadn't read any books about it, and there were no books that even touched on this topic. After this incident, I began to explore the area of existence between lives. Since then, my practice has gradually begun to help people who wanted to learn about their immortal nature. People began coming to me curious about who they really were, who their soulmates were, what their spiritual group was, why they were here on Earth, and so on. For me, these are the most important questions in life, and their psychological benefit lies in the fact that knowing these answers supports and empowers people. That's how I came to where I am today. What is my opinion on past life therapy? Most people, there are 2 types. Some understand hypnosis and its power, acknowledge its reality, and I myself adopted hypnosis as a medical practice in 1958, which is quite late, considering how many years it has been used here. I'd like to point out that during regressive hypnosis, people don't hallucinate. Their conscious mind is aware of what's happening around them. It's not like you're sleeping in a bed in a deep sleep state with delta brainwaves. Rather, you're in alpha and theta frequencies, so your conscious mind can work and facilitate the information emerging from the subconscious. Whether you believe in hypnosis or not depends on your willingness to accept it. We receive information as if it were real. Fundamentally, this isn't physics with its formulas, and it's impossible to provide scientific proof. I can only say that at first I was skeptical about past life regressions and the experience between lives, and what convinced me of their reality was my patients' accounts of it actually happening, with a surprisingly logical consistency in their reports. It didn't matter whether my clients were deeply religious, atheists, or had any philosophical affiliation. Plunged into a deep hypnotic trance, they all spoke the same thing about the spiritual world and life between lives. What happens when a person dies? At the moment of death, you rise above your body and can look at it from the outside. There are now many descriptions of near-death experiences, and many books have been published about them. People who have had such experiences have appeared on radio and television describing what they felt and experienced. However, it's important to remember that in such an experience, the person was dead for only a few minutes. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to talk about the experience at all. In my practice, a client can answer questions about all of this for 3 hours. Also, clients are in a relaxed state, and it's not a traumatic experience, so they can describe what happened very clearly. It's worth mentioning that there are 2 types of souls, those who are more developed and those who are beginners. In reality, there are many more types of souls, but for now I'm only discussing 2. Beginner souls have little experience with incarnations and sometimes have difficulty separating from the physical body. Such souls wander the earthly plane and must attend a funeral of their bodies, observing who came to say goodbye, who brought flowers, what tributes were paid to their bodies, whether they were cremated or buried. Such souls are not ready to immediately leave the astral plane, close to the planet. They may be disoriented and would like to live the same life over again. There is another type of soul, which has incarnated many times, is very experienced, and they leave the earthly plane very quickly. Both types of these souls, after the death of the body, naturally care for those left behind. All souls attempt to establish contact and comfort the grieving. They try to somehow attract their understanding, sending them strong mental messages to make it clear that they are still alive. Sometimes it's difficult because when a person is experiencing bitterness, they simply cannot notice such messages, so souls cannot say anything to their loved ones at the time, or perhaps even weeks or months later. Their intention is to make their loved ones feel good. When they leave the earthly plane, they describe bright lights and tunnels, the same as in the reports of those who have had near-death experiences. Now let me explain something important. We may have heard of people seeing religious leaders during near-death experiences, but I have never encountered a single case in all my many years of practice where someone saw the leader of any religion. What they see are their spirit guides, loving beings, teachers who come to the soul after the death of the body and accompany it in complete peace. I also want to say that you can meet people you knew in your life but who have passed away, and this is also a very beautiful experience. You can meet your mother, best friend, brother or sister. It's a very touching and beautiful experience. What do souls look like when a person who has just died sees their spirit guides or the souls of previously deceased acquaintances, soulmates? Usually they see a projection of a familiar face. They may look familiar to the person who has just died, or they may look easily recognizable to the deceased, so the faces and appearance may be different. People describe them as resembling ghosts when they approach them, and perhaps this is where the myths about ghosts come from. Sometimes they don't see anything like that. They see a ghostly light, first a point of light, and then a ghostly form as it approaches. Individual features can be discerned, projected for recognition. Do demons exist? No one who has been hypnotized. No, I haven't encountered demons or seen hell. We've heard similar stories from people who have had near-death experiences, although few have spoken about it. But I believe that people who claim to have heard screams felt themselves being dragged by demons to some kind of tribunal. It's similar to religions, various forms of intimidation. My clients simply haven't had that. When someone talks about such near-death experiences, I believe their consciousness has already been preconditioned by it. Furthermore, these people weren't under hypnosis. They could have been in a car accident or bleeding to death on the operating table. Their physical body was traumatized, and I believe their consciousness was overwhelmed by all the fears and anxieties they associated with the afterlife, which now manifested in this way. They're not describing a real phenomenon, as if they were being dragged by demons and ordered to be punished. The bright light and the tunnel are real, but when they begin to communicate something related to these people's conscious fears, I suspect preconditioning. My clients report that the spirit world is a place of love, forgiveness, and kindness, and that despite the actions people committed on earth, People may have committed evil acts for which they could have been sent instead, and yes, nothing of the sort. My clients, unbeknownst to them, are sent to an isolated area where they are given an orientation, where they understand what they did and why they did it. There is also a reshaping of energy, and I describe this process in the book Journey of Souls. I would simply like to say that those people who committed evil acts in the next life, by their own choice, will come to Earth as victims, and these will be voluntary actions. So the spirit world is not a place of fear and terror. What is a tribunal or judgment? Let me explain where the idea of a posthumous tribunal comes from, and how it can be filtered through the human subconscious. Before we go to a council of the wisest souls, holy ancient souls, they are given different names. These highly evolved beings give an overview of the life we've just lived. Our guides do this. All this is done in a secluded, quiet setting. There we calm down, gain energy, and can go on to the place of the spiritual world that we consider our home. We'll talk about this later. But for now, I want to say that the concept of the tribunal isn't what some people fear, imagining demons judging and punishing them for all their sins. These highly evolved beings are the greatest teachers. They surpass even our guides in their development in terms of knowledge, understanding, and experience. I can say that our guides accompany us to a very quiet, serene place, where these beings will converse with us. I want to note that some clients have seen only 3 of these elders, while others have seen up to 10 or 12. Everything depends on the individual soul and their spiritual groups, their development, and so on. These beings will very gently question the soul about how it spent its recent incarnation and how the soul itself feels about its life. They will ask about your regrets, mistakes, but also about your successes. So it's a very gentle process. Everyone goes through this after completing an incarnation, and some also go to their elders before their next incarnation to review their planned life path. Are there young and old souls? The idea of young and old souls can be confusing. Let me explain why. You may be an old soul, incarnated since the Stone Age, but you haven't learned your lessons well or quickly, so you'll need to move from the beginner to the intermediate level and then to a more advanced soul level, simply because you need more time and life to accomplish everything that needs to be done. I've also known people who progressed very quickly. One woman incarnated on Earth for only 4,000 years, and during that time she developed from the beginner to the intermediate transitional level. This is rapid. This can be determined by the colors of the aura that the soul has in the spiritual world. However, this is connected to a person's aura on Earth. I can determine the level of soul development by the colors of my energy. It took me a very long time to study all these aspects. I had to assemble this puzzle piece by piece. I didn't have a complete picture right away. During the first session with that woman and the life between lives, I had to work hard, because people themselves don't readily provide all the information, and it took me many years to gather it all. I would also like to say that I tried to do my work impartially. When I ask my mentor, elders, and so on, I say, "What do you see?" They respond, "You see this or that." So, no matter how many sessions I have with clients, the material is fresh for them. I ask open-ended questions so they can give me the answers that arise in their consciousness, and the most interesting and helpful answers come from the Council of Elders. What about ghosts? There's a misconception among people about ghosts. I believe there are entities that haven't left the astral plane because they're not ready yet. They're very upset about something. Perhaps these people were killed and are seeking revenge and so on. In the soul world, no one forces anyone to do anything. When such souls are ready, senior helpers help them move on to the other world. From my own research on ghosts, I believe the soul is dual. The soul has the ability to live parallel lives, sharing its energy between the dense and subtle worlds, so a ghost can exist with part of its energy on the near-Earth plane, while at the same time one can find, say, a holographic image of the same soul in the soul world. At the same time, we never stop learning and in fact never lose connection with the soul world. What are soul groups? Soul groups are one of the most interesting aspects of my work. The reason is that people whom I help connect with their soul group tell me that their level of development also depends on how well the rest of their group progresses. This gives me a better understanding of the individual soul's level of development. Within each soul group, there is a diversity of personalities. There are bold and short-tempered souls, passive souls, souls who are more helpful to others, and those who focus more on themselves, quiet, contemplative souls, and joyful souls. Based on this information, I can largely psychologically determine the type of soul group my client comes from and how I can help them in terms of this life's lessons and their purpose. But there's another remarkable point. We all develop at different rates, taking different paths and in different areas of life. I like to give the example of a man who needed over 4,000 Earth years to learn to cope with jealousy. In this incarnation, he's not jealous. He's extremely intolerant. We were working on that, but he's not jealous. That was his specific issue that required so much work. But there's a very tolerant soul in his soul group, and they tried to help him between incarnations. That's what I mean by developmental progress indicators. I've also found that the entire developmental soul group shares common goals and issues, and thus they move forward together. Some are faster, some are slower, but essentially everyone is at roughly the same level of development. What is the purpose of life? The original plan for us is to learn lessons, to become better, to understand more, to understand where we are in our development and where we need to go. Why is this question so important? Many people I've worked with have incarnated in other worlds and dimensions besides planet Earth. A characteristic of incarnation on Earth is a state of amnesia, when a memory block is established in the human consciousness after incarnation, so that we don't know how to remember, not so much our soul, but the souls of our guides. Interestingly, the situation is different for very young children. You might see 2-year-old boys or girls playing in a sandbox with imaginary friends, who may not be just imaginary. Around the age of entering first grade, this perception is common, with flashes of memory that then fade, and a block like amnesia sets in. They no longer remember themselves as souls, nor their friends from the soul world. It's worth noting that planet Earth is a place for self-exploration. The idea is that without knowing the test questions before coming here, you solve your problems yourself, in your own time and circumstances, in this body. Of course, a body can have genetic problems. Souls choose bodies with problems, for example, aggressive behavior, or a chemical imbalance that causes other behavioral issues, and the incarnate must overcome these problems to learn the lessons for which they came to Earth. I note that this is done according to plan. Each of us has chosen a body for ourselves in advance. We have a general idea of what this body will be like, and the soul chooses its bodies with the help of its guides to learn specific lessons. But there are also souls who incarnate on other planets without such amnesia. They could be flying underwater creatures, highly intelligent at the same time. They could be interdimensional beings, fiery, aquatic, or gaseous. There are many paths to our development and understanding of who we are. These are, in essence, also about the power of our energy. Earth is just one school of thought. What is the ultimate purpose of the soul? I find it difficult to use the word God because I came into this as an atheist. I didn't believe in the existence of anything after this life, other than complete extinction. It was my clients, so to speak, who dragged me into all this, screaming and fighting. Only after several years of work and consistent communication with many clients, which I myself explored as a hypnotherapist, have I come to the point where I can say, I believe in the existence of a power greater than myself, a source of all life and intelligence. The idea of reincarnation is to achieve this state of perfection, when we can, so to speak, reconnect with the source from which we emerged. If there is room for fun in the world of souls, this is one of the more amusing aspects of my work. Some people think I spend too much time on this, and that I don't take it all very seriously. I believe the soul world is a place of humor and fun. Not just that, but also that engaging with the energies of creation, which I write about in my books, isn't just about learning and mastering lessons, there's much more to that, but also about rest and restoration. Many clients there have told me how they played games, some of which involved two teams colliding like balls of energy to combine and mix their intelligent energies, like a car crash. Others talk about games like dodgeball with balls of energy. There are also more esoteric games, like traveling to planets devoid of intelligent life to frolic there. Souls don't take lessons, they simply have fun and play. When I say there's room for humor and play in the soul world, some people get upset because they think it's all so serious, but I found that's not the case at all. What about other worlds? Here are some interesting reports from people incarnated in other worlds. There are similarities, Perhaps those who come to Earth also enjoy visiting other worlds, and what they encounter here on Earth may be similar to those environments from other worlds. For example, when I speak to a large audience, I ask how many in the audience have dreamed of flying. Typically, over 75% raise their hands. Then I ask how many have dreamed they could swim underwater and breathe as highly evolved, intelligent life. About half raise their hands. Then I ask an even more specific question. How many dreamed they were giants and everything around them was smaller? Only a few hands go up. And then I ask how many dreamed they were very small creatures and everything around them was large, and only 12 out of 100 turned out that way. This indicates that our dreams also tell us a lot about past lives, that many of those incarnated on Earth have also incarnated in worlds where they flew or swam. I've had clients tell me about incarnations as highly evolved flying beings on other worlds, and how they also appeared as unified worlds and their inhabitants, when they could swim in the depths and underwater settlements. They didn't look like whales or dolphins at all, although those existed, but rather like creatures so strange in appearance that they only appear in our mythology. This, by the way, is also an interesting area to study, because mythology can also derive from these kinds of memories. I'll also say that I've had clients who had no other incarnations except on Earth, and there are also plenty of those who lived on other worlds. And what about dreams? I describe dreams primarily in 3 categories. When we clear out our subconscious at the end of the day, it's like cleaning a house. When we clear out a lot of it, a lot of our dreams become like short circuits, and we've all had dreams that are completely absurd, where we wake up in the morning wondering what it all means, or where we wake up in the middle of the night while sleeping and can't figure out what it all means. We also have dreams in which problems are solved. We go to bed with we have a specific problem, and somehow when we wake up in the morning, we begin to receive answers to it. This is more of a mental type of dream, where our problem is analyzed and the dream state helps us solve it. And we also have spiritual dreams. The dreams I mentioned, the ones involving flying and scuba diving, where we are other beings, yet we don't realize in our normal state that we're reliving old past experiences. I'll also note that dreams are a solution to spiritual problems and can be combined. During sleep, we can receive help from our guide on some serious issue that we can't resolve during the day, when our minds aren't open to receiving information from guides, with the possible exception of those practicing meditation. So the only way for this information to be conveyed to us is through the dream state. In general, dreams come in different types. What about future lives? Future lives are a realm I've occasionally stumbled into by accident. Some of my colleagues work a lot with future progression instead of past regression. I've heard clients report future events, such as spaceships. In many cases, I don't like working with the future, even when a client can tell me a lot, because from a karmic perspective, it's better not to know what awaits them. I believe it's important to uncover meaning ourselves through the present situations we face. So I haven't particularly focused on this topic, but I've had many clients report life in the 21st and 22nd centuries, how overpopulated the Earth will be by then, and with severe air pollution, that it will be a difficult time to live. That's why my wife and I have come to the conclusion that it's best to wait about 100 years before our next incarnation together. But I must also point out that there's also the question of the very nature of time. People who ask me if it's possible to look into the future are suddenly confronted with the question of time itself. The past, present, and future is existing in a single moment, and this can be confusing. This doesn't particularly affect us when we're talking about past lives and the present. But when we turn to the future, we discover that time isn't absolute and doesn't have the same chronology as it does for us on Earth. Essentially, from the soul world, we can look into the future just as we can into the past. If we couldn't do this, we wouldn't be able to choose our bodies and wouldn't have any idea of the tasks ahead. But we choose a specific and appropriate body for ourselves, so if necessary, we can approach the philosophical concept that the past, present, and future are interconnected, and modern scientists have done a great deal of work on this issue. The entire field of quantum mechanics is based on the belief that everything is electromagnetic light energy, and that time is essentially movement. They are chronology. So there's a broader understanding of this issue, that there is no such chronology of past, present, and future as we usually understand it here on Earth. It's difficult to accept because we see from morning until dawn. So night sets, there is day and night. We age, we see everything around us changing. So for our perception, this chronology and time are very important as an absolute category. But in the world of souls, there is no such perception of time. When we reincarnate, when the soul decides, and with the help of guides, that it is time to move on and incarnate again, souls go to a place where they study the bodies from which to choose. I have found that this point varies among clients. Some are given 3 bodies to choose from, others only 1. But I have never had a client say that the choice was not right. The guides and masters know so much about them and what needs to be done, so mistakes are excluded. I've found that many are very happy to have chosen this particular body for their next life. They watch it as if they were going to a television studio or a movie theatre, watching highlights of their upcoming lives in static footage, to see how well suited this personality and body are for incarnating as a soul. This is also considered in terms of progress in their tasks and lessons. I want to point out that this is an extremely important part of my work, understanding how the soul's mind is connected to its own mind, to its brain. As I've noted before, the body into which a person is about to incarnate combines different soul personalities with corresponding bodies, and in the womb, we analyze what this human mind is and how it can be connected to it. In other words, there are 2 aspects to the mind. As soon as we are born, this merging occurs. This is impossible if the soul is some kind of alien being. The fetus recognizes this intelligent being and invites it. If the soul were removed from the body, you would be left with rudimentary instincts and raw emotions like aggression, which also affect us. But these emotions are more characteristic of the physical body, and the soul learns to cope with them. The soul itself brings intuition, imagination, morality, and so on into the body. So this is a very important moment, choosing a new body and deciding whether it is right for the soul. When this period of exploration ends, the soul says goodbye to loved ones and a group of guides, and departs for the womb of its future mother to unite. What does a dying person feel? My clients describe death as a profoundly beautiful experience. Much of the trauma simply fades after death itself. They rise above their bodies and realize they are immortal beings. Oh my God, I'm not dead. That's it. Often people, looking at their bodies, begin to remember who they are, what they've experienced, and memories of past incarnations are immediately awakened. Recognizing this, they understand that ordinary life is merely an intermediate stage. This doesn't mean they can't grieve for their spouse or children who lie mortal beside them. However, the soul doesn't feel pain in the same way humans do, because we are immortal beings. They realize that they will soon be reunited with those they have now left behind. Moreover, I would say that most people experience 2 things at the moment of transition: freedom and joy. What then does a troubled soul mean? Troubled souls are the souls of those who, for example, were murdered or who lived extremely traumatic and unhappy lives. It could be said that such souls were contaminated by their physical shells, whether through genetic predispositions or environmental influences, which led to a difficult life. It's also possible that these are young souls who are still struggling to cope with certain difficulties inherent to their given body-mental structure, while a more experienced soul navigates them calmly. There are many reasons why a soul might experience anxiety while in the body, and these are only the most common. Are there different levels of soul? In my book, I reveal the existence of 3 main stages of soul development: beginner, intermediate, and developed. There are also several intermediate gradations between these levels. I believe the main difference between beginner and intermediate souls is that upon reaching the intermediate level, you begin to accept the lessons of a teacher, assuming more responsibility. You already have many challenging lives behind you, which you have successfully navigated. One of the key indicators our mentors and teachers pay attention to is how we treat others throughout life. How we treat others is similar to how we treat ourselves. If people are sufficiently selfless and generous, it can be assumed that they are moving toward the intermediate level. The difference between the intermediate and advanced levels is that at first a soul is just learning to be a teacher and then develops to the level of an experienced mentor. For more advanced souls, the work is quite demanding. Many of them teach several souls during incarnations, both on Earth and in other worlds. They also bear responsibility in the soul world, leading entire groups, acting as spiritual teachers, conducting lessons, and working with each individual soul according to their program. So, what is the essential difference between beginner and advanced souls? And what about soulmates? The topic of soulmates is, of course, shrouded in misconceptions. In the world of souls, and as I mentioned about soul groups, each of us has many soulmates. Our group may consist of 4 or 5 different souls, or it may consist of 25 or 30. It all depends on how quickly we progress to more advanced stages. It's debatable whether your wife or husband is your soulmate, or your friend, or your business partner. It's entirely possible that all of them are your soulmates and came from your soul group. For me, the strongest soulmate connections are those with whom we choose to incarnate as married couples, those with whom we've already met in many lifetimes, even changing genders, for example, as men in one life and women in another. This is another indicator of soul development, as I've also discovered that a soul generally incarnates only as a man or only as a woman until it reaches an intermediate level, when it chooses the gender of its body. Soulmates are a very important aspect of our lives. We learn the most important lessons with our soulmates. What are orientation and movement? Orientation is when you go to the soul world to review your past life, analyze what you did right and what you did wrong. Movement is when you move into the soul world, where you live with other beloved souls from your group and can see other groups. And the final stage is when you move on, to rebirth, to entering a body. After a period of life between lives, you are ready to enter a new body in a new life and go through your next lessons, which will reveal your purpose.